pretty happy. I went to bed at 8:30 last night. So that was pretty cool. So I'm here to talk about something different that is truly fundamental to everything you guys do, both from an operational perspective and for yourself personally. So most people don't talk about isometric exercise, ever, when it comes to performance. We live in a world where we have adopted this term called movement is medicine. Pretty much 100% of you know that most non-contact injuries and most injuries that humans sustain are a result of movement. So if individuals are injured by something you guys are calling medicine, I think we need to change the conversation slightly. Because if I were to tell you that movement is important, and it is, what you inherently do is omit isometric muscle contractions from the conversation. So my name is Brad Thorpe. I invented this product called IsoFit. It's a motion restraint device. It restrains all human joint motion at every muscle length and every muscle position for virtually every scenario you guys have talked about all weekend, or midweek, where over the weekend. So, a little bit about IsoFit. So we currently, if I look at our customers' brand value, just to understand trust and where we're fitting in. So our customer brand value currently tops $92 billion is what we look after right now. That excludes the tactical world that we're in. We supply the US Army, the US Air Force, the British Royal Navy, and the FBI as well, in addition to this $92 billion. So one of the things that I like to say, we help the world's strongest, fastest, and most dominant athletes and everyday people win more, hurt less, and age stronger. So really, when you start to look at that, as every human that you encounter can benefit from what we do. I like to talk about our guarantees, because people like guarantees in life. So when using IsoFit, and more so isometric exercise, so we don't need to promote my company for that much longer. The 4 guarantees that I can make when you imply or utilize isometric-based exercise, I can guarantee that we're going to help with your force generation. I can guarantee you're going to help with force tolerance, force transference, and force expression. So that's where we live in. It's a physics-based approach to exercise. So we're currently in 46 countries. We have over 1,000 of the coolest clients you'd ever dream of. And I will say I hired my first employee 4 months ago. So that's kind of cool. So what we're doing seems to be working with a lot of really, really cool people. I don't know if you know basketball. So, fun fact. So during the gold medal game for the Summer Olympics, 16 of the 24 athletes use IsoFit. That was kind of cool. So you can sort of see what Manuel said. It's a pretty versatile product. And if you know who he is, he was the NBA Rookie of the Year. Last year we got pulled into the University of South Carolina Gamecocks to help with a young man by the name of Raheem Sanders. He turned out to be the comeback player of the year last year for the NBA, or the NCAA. That's kind of cool. Different sport. Similar outcome. So one of the things that I can pretty much tell you, I don't sell a product, we deliver outcomes. Because people don't pay for products, they literally pay for those outcomes. And you can sort of see what the Wake Forest team sort of said. IsoFit's been a great addition to our return to play and training protocols. That's what they put out. So that's pretty cool. I don't pay for marketing. I'm very, very fortunate. So a little bit of a success story. I don't know if you follow figure skating at all. It's pretty intense from a sport perspective. This is Alyssa Cesny. So she was a 2-time former US figure skating champion, 2009, 2011. She retired from figure skating after her 3rd surgery. She missed the Olympics because she had to go get surgery instead. 3 hip labral tears. So she was introduced to ISOFIT in 2018, and then all of a sudden she got back into the world of competitive figure skating. And then she won the US Senior Nationals a decade later after her last 2. Now, in order to qualify to perform on the Stars on Ice, you have to be able to do a triple. That's 3 rotations around and be able to land. So we have an older athlete, a decade really kind of removed from competition, being able to perform moves that she actually had to stop. This is Susan. Susan had a misfortunate accident at the age of 76. She went to talk to somebody and there was a potted plant right by her ankle. She stepped over a potted plant, she fractured her femur. Doesn't have much of her femur left, and she fractured her humerus. So Susan sent me a message so she was introduced to ISOFIT. She trains remotely, she lives just outside Seattle. She trains with a lady in Nashville, Franklin specifically. So they do 2 remote sessions a week, and then Susan came into Toronto and she wanted to hang out with me, so it was pretty cool. So she walked up a mountain down in Ecuador this past year. So if there's one takeaway I want you guys to think about today and going forward, every skeletal muscle contraction begins as an isometric contraction. So if you're looking at power development, change of direction, standing, sitting, picking up a grandchild, swinging a golf club, it just comes back to this. If you are not focused on enhancing your body's ability to create and upregulate isometric tension, things are going to be delayed and you're going to be at risk of injury. And we're going to explore the architectures of an injury in a little bit. But for you guys that can't remember, it's been too long, or you never learned about what an isometric is, an isometric contraction occurs when there's an upregulation of muscle tension with little to no visible joint or change in joint position. Because the muscle actually does lengthen and shorten during an isometric contraction because the tendon structure will change length. So it gets really, really kind of complicated in there. And what they've been able to see is the muscle will actually change length, both longitudinally and radially, by 16%, give or take. So that's a fair bit of movement occurring in the muscle structure when there's no quote-unquote movement occurring. So just to reinforce this, prior to all dynamic muscle action, there's an upregulation of isometric tension. Similar to a rocket ship. In order to create lift, you have to create thrust. Right? Simple. So if every skeletal muscle contraction begins as an isometric contraction, how do we improve it? Because I can tell you, and science will indicate, dynamic training for the purpose of increasing isometric force production is pretty inefficient. They'll have people do 12 weeks worth of training, and the net gain in isometric strength is near 0. So one of the things when we look at all these ungodly athletes that we have in the world, we've created bigger, faster, stronger, more fragile athletes. Why are they getting injured more? You guys see the data. Not getting any injured less. So we have to kind of develop 3 key areas. The central nervous system. I link tendon and bone intertwined, to be honest. Obviously, structurally, they are different, but if you have a fragile bone, it's like an anchoring system, it's not so good. And then obviously the muscle. So some of the neural adaptations when you're looking at isometric strength training, right? And this is by no means a science class, so it's going to be quick. But when you look at the best ways to activate muscles, well, according to this journal article from going way back to 2001, so 24 years ago, they kind of concluded that isometrics is the best, concentric was second, and eccentric training was third. But if you wish to activate muscle to perform better with your performance, whether it's post-op rehabilitation, whether it happens to be in-game competition, isometrics is a great way to look at activating muscle tissue. Did we mention it's also safer? Right? Here's an interesting study from 2023. What they were looking at was high force isometrics and low force isometrics, and just sort of ran in between the two of them to see how your brain functioned. And, so they put on a wonderful little head cap on. Here's your EEG. They measured all your brainwave patterns and all that wonderful stuff. And what they found was the neurophysiological basis of physical exertion. The harder you try, the more it excites your brain. It actually helps with intra-brain communication and the communication between the different areas, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, one of the things I wanted you guys to see how we have a whole bunch of group, like women in a group doing bicep curls. So you can take the science. Your back button doesn't work. That's okay. But you saw in the previous slide, or you probably didn't, I was pretty quick. There you go. So see how this lady with the cap on is doing this like a standing bicep curl. So you can take the research and then bring it forth to society pretty quick. This is Mark Cuban's, or one of Mark Cuban's former companies, which is kind of cool. How many of you are familiar with the term anticipatory postural adjustments? It's not usually discussed. Pretty much, in the sports science place, we really got this thing called post-activation potentiation, and everyone seems to hang their hat on it. They absolutely love it. It works, it's cool. But if I was going to stand here and do something like this, the only thing you're not looking at is my right hand. Right? So prior to any level of dynamic movement, you're going to have an upregulation of isometric tension. It's subconscious, they like to say, you can train it. Because we see it with our people all the time. Right, so what it is, it refers to the pre-programmed muscle activation that occurs prior, or before, however you want to phrase it, to voluntary movement, such as reaching for an object, taking a step. It's crucial because it helps maintain balance and stability by counteracting the potential tuberation caused by the movement, ensuring you don't lose balance or falls. The last week we'll talk about osteoarthritis and falls and stuff like that. So as you can see, we can do a bunch of stuff with our product, and I highly encourage you to come over to our booth before things happen. Now, how effective is isometrics? Well, there's one study, it's going back to 2007, they were looking at the neural system and how effective isometrics work. So basically, 4 minutes of time under tension, done 3 days a week, for 12 workouts, led to a 20.4% improvement in MVC torque, so maximum voluntary torque. Rate of force development, which obviously is really important for fall prevention and or cutting and pivoting and jumping, increased 42.5% after 12 workouts. Remember the length of the workout was only 4 minutes. And then the voluntary activation of this tissue of the neural system increased from 97.2 to 99.1, so nearly 100% activation rate in the tissues that they looked at, and that was plantar flexion, by the way. Tendons, pretty important stuff, vital for transferring force. The industry, in my opinion, does an ungodly disservice when it comes to this tissue. Historically, we talk about the Achilles tendon ad nauseum. We talk about the quad tendon. We talk about the patella tendon. And then it's crickets. We don't talk about many more tendons beyond that. But yet they're vital for transferring force to create and or prevent movement. So there are over 4,000 tendons in the human body, and we choose to talk about 3 of them consistently. This audience is going to be a little bit different because you guys are a bunch of surgeons and you fix a whole bunch of stuff. But tendons account for roughly 50% of all reported sport and workplace injuries, which is pretty crazy, right? Take your psoas as an example. Nobody ever talks about your psoas tendon. Why would you? It only attaches to the anterior surface of your spine. That's probably pretty important for a lot of stuff. Your psoas, if you think about it, goes from T12 to L5 over to your lesser trochanter. Each individual vertebrae is going to have its own individual tendon. So psoas has 7 tendons. That's pretty cool. But we don't talk about it. Therefore, we increase the likelihood of osteoporosis of our lumbar spine because we don't have the force going through there. So, to recap, tendons connect muscles to bone, forms periosteum, which is the outermost surface of the bones, kind of fibers and all that wonderful stuff. It's pretty important. There are many studies on tendons, but this one seemed to serve me well. So this is going back to 2009. Kobo was probably one of the lead researchers from yesteryear. So what they found in their study was, it was a comparative study between dynamic training and isometric training. What they found was doing isometrics increased tendon stiffness by 55% versus 30% for the dynamic side. NBC, so nice involuntary contraction, well, 49% versus 31.5%. I did not say don't do dynamic exercise. However, if outcomes are important, which usually they are, I would highly recommend you explore the isometric component of training because it's giving you a better result for tendon stiffness and also muscle strength. Roughly 650 muscles, as we all know, right? What most people don't think about is muscles prevent movement from occurring. Nearly 100% of all non-contact injuries are a response to tissue displacement. How do you prevent a muscle or a tissue from displacing? You contract it isometrically so it doesn't move. An overlooked thing. Muscles also circulate blood and also circulate lymph. Right? So 2 important things. So if you have an ineffective muscular system, you have an ineffective tendon system, you don't circulate lymph very well. You don't circulate blood very well. And obviously you can look at sort of the physical sort of attributes like force, power, work, velocity, and torque. Most people don't know what a moment arm, so it's a perpendicular line between the axis of rotation and the line of force. This is going to help determine what muscles are participating in the exercises you guys kind of select. So because we're trying to sort of show you guys the value add of isometrics, let's look at a comparative study. They compared isometrics to concentric to eccentric. And this is going way back in time. So it's Jones and Rutherford. It was 1983, to be honest. So they compared isometrics to eccentrics to concentrics. And as you can sort of see, wrong. So if I sort of look over here, the one over here, the slash mark, that's the eccentric. Central one is the concentric, then we have isometrics. We're increasing isometric strength. Shockingly, isometrics was nearly 100, no, it's actually over 100% better from an outcome perspective. Cross-sectional area, isometrics is on par between the 2 dynamic components. And then when you're thinking about the density of the tissue, isometrics is actually higher, according to the study. And now we can even compare isometrics to isometrics if we're looking over here. So this is an isometric squat. I was talking to a young lady, she asked me what's the difference between a dynamic squat and an isometric squat. A dynamic squat obviously has instability. An isometric squat doesn't have instability, or it has significantly less. So what we're looking at here is standing on a wobbly surface versus a stable surface. The wobbly surface, if I look way up there, you can sort of see the forces from a Newton perspective are almost 1,000 newtons less. So that might be good, it might be bad, it depends on the audience that you're working with. I look at force production from a lot of my clients that I work with and organizations that we consult with. If you can generate more force, you're probably going to be able to tolerate more force. And you're certainly going to be able to transfer and express force. So with that, a lot of people don't understand forces. So let's give you a very, very rudimentary, quick sort of crash course lesson. So in this scenario, the string represents a muscle. So one muscle handling 100 pounds, got 100 pounds of force. If I go 2 muscles, it's 50 pounds. If I go to 3 muscles, it's 33. We'll expedite this whole process. If I go way down here, I get 10 muscles supporting 100 pounds. It's now 10 pounds per strain. Now this is where it gets interesting from an injury perspective. So if I have 10 muscles and they're working and they're handling 100 pounds, and then I have life stress trauma injury, injures 3 muscles, it regresses, it goes back to 14.28 pounds per strain. I've had a 42.8% increase in load on those tissues. We historically start to attack tight tissue. And what will end up happening is you go, oh, let's attack that tight tissue, it's 14.28. Well, now we sort of loosen off that tissue, now it's 16.67. We've almost had a 70% workload into that tissue. If my left side is working 75 or 70% harder than my right side, muscle is adaptive. I will cause a side bend. That will also lead to a rotational effect. You guys heard of scoliosis. That could be looked at, right? So this is where isometrics really comes into play. Simplifying things. Now, one of the things I want to sort of point out is not all isometrics are the same. So historically, you had overcoming and yielding isometrics. Modern day people have changed the terms to holding isometric muscle action, which is known as a HEMA. That would be replacing the yielding isometric. And then you have what's called PEMA, which is pulling or pushing isometric muscle action, which was the overcoming isometric. So what are some of the major differences? Well, according to the literature, HEMAs are quicker to fatigue, and that's obviously load dependent. So I can be standing here, put a weight around my ankle, that would be sort of that HEMA environment. Here's the biggest risk that's never discussed. If I'm holding something in space, let's say it's 100 pounds, and I start to get tired, we all heard about fatigue. That 100 pounds gets heavier relative to my fatigue state. That puts you at risk of injury. And when you're dealing with guys making hundreds of millions of dollars, putting them under a risk of injury that you didn't calculate might not be the most appropriate thing. Right, then we got challenging to select the appropriate load. What part of the point of application did I want? Did I want it in their hand? Did I want it in forearm? Did I want it in the humeral sort of position? All of these decisions matter. So you got to also move the position and the load into the position. Then you got to put it back down, so there's high risk associated with that. And one of the things they're starting to see with the HEMA, it may slow down your athletes, which in today's modern day is not what you're looking for. So fun fact, it's a guy named Jared Allen. I don't know if you guys follow basketball at all. So he's 6'11", so if you're worried about like, oh, what's gonna happen, the machine's too small for small, like normal sized people, and don't have to worry about that. But Jared Allen, so a couple of years ago, we started working with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he was, from an injury perspective, chronically injured for about 3 years in a row. When we got in, he played 52 games in 2022-23 season. This year, he played all 82 games. So that's incredible. So he had consistent chronic back issues. Just kind of cool. So one of the benefits of PEMA, so the pushing isometric, you can push and hold longer. Well, according to the research, this is really good for tendon adaptations. It's also good for that neural cognition and reformation of intrabrain communications as well, right? The restraint matches the output in real time. So if I'm shoving on something that does not move, it's going to upregulate tension from 0 force to your peak force. And then if you keep pushing, it's actually going to drop off and match your output in real time. We like to call that rate of isometric force fatigue. Nobody's currently studying that there in Delaware. So one of the things when you're looking at injuries, they occur when you get tired. And if isometric force governs dynamic movement, you have to look at isometric force and the rate of force fatigue in order to predict. Nobody likes that. You can see when people are going to get injured because they get tired faster. Because the forces don't change because you got tired. So anyways, they're simple to this stage. If I'm pushing into this and I choose to stop, it's easy. And the perceived exertion increases as the load decreases. So I have a built-in inherent safety mechanism. It's So 3 areas I want you guys to focus on. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend if you guys adopt an isometric approach, you put it in this sequence. You want to focus on isometric strength endurance. I want you to build the tolerance to the bone structure and the tendon structure before you worry about max output. Because you risk avulsion fractures and you risk putting people into some sort of injury state. Right, so the total duration, I like to use about 45 seconds. Beyond 45 seconds, you lose athlete buy-in. It gets boring and redundant. So we like that sort of 45-second window. Peak isometric force, how much force you can generate? The reason you don't start there, and every testing protocol out there usually starts there. The amount of force you can generate isometrically far exceeds what you can generate dynamically. It's not even close. World strong guy, Eddie Hall. So he was the first guy to ever lift half a ton, which is cool, 500 kilograms. So when he did an isometric mid-thigh pull, so 1,102 pounds, his dynamic pull, his isometric mid-thigh pull was 1,700. That's a discrepancy. Are you prepared for 600-pound load increase? Let's say you're dealing with somebody like mid-thigh pull, everyone likes these things. What if you got scoliosis? What if you have 8 degrees and it's not clinically diagnosed as a scoliosis because you didn't get to 10? Look at the facet joint irritation you have to consider. Then you get down into this high-risk thing, this holistic isometric or explosive isometric is another way. That's stuff that occurs at a rate you can't really see. They say push really hard, really fast, and it's really dangerous for a lot of people. So put that third after you prepared them. Now it gets interesting because the science world loves rate of force development. I guess into the more ballistic side. But 70% of the actual outcome of the rate of force development is preceded by peak force. And when you're looking at force transfer, if you got weak tendons, you don't transfer force through. Right? So you can start to see why you would want to put through there. Right? So isometric strength endurance. So one of the major benefits is you're looking at all these tendons responsible for transmitting and expressing force. Right, so there increased tendon stiffness, enhanced force transfer, force generation, increases rate of force development, improves physical performance, reduces the risk of injury. And one of the cool things when you guys measure pain and you do all these assessments, what you'll usually come up with and say, hey, he's in pain, he can't generate as much isometric force. Then you have a body of evidence that says, hey, when I do isometrics, I actually have an analgesic effect and I can get rid of pain. So just put 2 and 2 together, just do the damn isometric. And what you'll see is the pain goes away, they get stronger really fast. And then they can start moving and getting back to the outcomes. Right? Most people don't think of collisions as isometric. The person who generates less isometric usually loses. This is where it gets really cool in sport, though, the ballistic isometric force. It literally is the start, stop, and change the direction of everything. So we historically don't explore how injuries occur. If I cut and pivot, I have to zero out velocity and re-accelerate. It doesn't matter if it's 15, like a thousandth of a second. You still have to zero that out. In force testing, they call it the amortization phase for some reason. Makes no sense. So if I'm able to figure that out, because if I don't change my direction, it comes back, I introduce shear force going across my knee. And as we know, that's the framework of an ACL rupture. If I'm looking at body mass moving back, if I'm an NBA athlete, right? They're now saying nearly 100%, actually they say 100% of all ACL ruptures in the NBA, Achilles ruptures, are caused of a false step. Well, let's break down the false step. I have body mass moving back, inertial effects going that way, and now I re-accelerate this way. So if I can't control zero, I now rapidly elongate my Achilles tendon. It's not that complicated. Now let's throw in something really cool. How often do they talk about your flexor digitorum longus tendon, tibialis posterior tendon, flexor digitorum longus tendon? The answer is usually never. So it's a matter of just looking at some stuff and further exploring it. So when we're looking at this, once again, it's hard to argue going from 53 games to 82 games over a 2-year period. That's pretty cool. The reason that I'm so passionate about isometrics, I'll be 100% honest, has nothing to do with orthopedics. It has everything to do with blood pressure. And I'm going to take a quick little side tangent because many of you are going to be affected by blood pressure at some point in time. When you're looking at hypertension, and this is a peer-reviewed study, meta-analysis, all that gold standard stuff, came out in 2023. When I went through school for cardiovascular rehabilitation, they told me that I should not do isometrics because it was bad for blood pressure. So, upon further review and better science, the effectiveness rating, so the super value of isometrics is 98.3, what they found. And when you're looking at aerobic training, it's 40.5. 40.5 is the gold standard, and we have to look at that. And we have to make a change. And from an exercise perspective, one of the most common questions I get asked is, where do you go and how do you start? So we created a program called 30 and 30. It's 30 isometrics in 30 minutes, 45-second muscle contractions, the 15-second transition time. So you get 22.5 minutes of time under tension, 7.5 minutes of rest. It's laid out for you, it's easy to follow, it comes with pretty pictures, and what you do is you just introduce it to your audience. So I can look at this section. So if I have a 10-minute program and I change those interval times, I can actually cut it to 15 seconds and 5 seconds. So I can fit a 30 exercise program in 10 minutes. You don't have 10 minutes, I can cut it down to 3 minutes and 20 seconds by picking a segment. So we have now professional sport teams using IsoFit on the sidelines. That's in the G League right now, so it's not the NBA, but it's coming, where they had the spin bike before. Right? And as you can see, the versatility, that's a ton of programming. Because when you're looking at how do you implement isometrics, you cannot look at it from a home renovation perspective. You can't just fix the closet. You have to look at the entire structure of the body. Right? Because the cervical spine, which nobody ever trains, you look at that and go, well, it governs your central nervous system. Some people are motivated by helping people. When you're philanthropic, you can help more people. How do you become more philanthropic? You make more money, then you can help more people. So I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen. If you have questions, feel free to ask. It said 0 time, to be honest. I just noticed that right now, so I don't even know how long I spoke. So thank you.